Friday. Okay. A lot happening in the world. I don't have to tell all of you. Just a couple of notes for you all at the top. This morning we learned the unemployment rate is 4.2%, down by a historic 2 full percentage points since President Biden took office. Prior to the American Rescue Plan, CBO estimated that the U.S. would not have a 4.2% unemployment rate until the end of 2024. So this gives you that chart just to give you a sense of exactly what the CBO projections were and how much more quickly we moved to that unemployment rate. After the Great Recession, it took 9 years for the United States to reach a 4.2% unemployment rate, just to give you a sense. The unemployment rate is dropping even more, even as more people are reentering the workforce and looking for jobs. That's good news. There's no doubt that the Biden economic agenda is getting people back to work. In November, we added an additional 210,000 jobs for a total of 6 million jobs in the first 10 full months of the president's administration. That is a record for a new president. Wages are also up, and thanks to the American Rescue Plan, the president and congressional Democrats delivered significant tax cuts for families raising kids. On average, Americans have about $100 more in their pockets each month than they did last year, even accounting for higher prices. The United States is the only leading economy in the world where household income and the economy are stronger than they were before the pandemic. And our COVID strategy is allowing millions of workers to find jobs and ensuring our country can weather any challenges without shutting down our businesses or our schools. We know though there is more work penalty if for insulin country summit for summit opening. Go ahead.
Clarify what the president meant when he said earlier he was putting together a quote comprehensive and meaningful set of initiatives to deter Putin. And then one more on that. Does the administration think that Ukraine needs to do anything more than it's doing to deter Russia? Should there be concessions from Ukraine?
Well, let me start with a sense, I think, of time past European partners with Congress. Those consultations have been ongoing, and we just want to be prepared. As it relates to the potential for a call, we have been engaged in the possibility of that. When we have that finalized, we will make that. We will make you all aware of that. As you know, the president is somebody who believes in leader-to-leader diplomacy. It certainly would be an opportunity to discuss our serious concerns about the bellicose rhetoric about the military buildup that we're seeing on the border of Ukraine. Go ahead. You had another question.
Ukraine.
Yes.
Does the administration think that Ukraine should be offering anything more to Russia to try to deter some of that bellicose rhetoric, the actions that we've seen?
Well, I think we are not the only country who feels that the onus is really on Russia to reduce their bellicose rhetoric, to make some changes as it relates to the buildup of military troops that we see at the border, and the onus is really on them.
And then on Iran, the Iran talks have not been going well. There are reports that the Western negotiators told the Iran negotiators their opening proposals were, quote, unserious. So will those talks continue as planned? Is the administration still hopeful for a diplomatic approach?
We are always hopeful for a diplomatic approach. That's always the best option. The seventh round of talks did end today in Vienna. Special Envoy Malley and his interagency team are returning to Washington now. The new Iranian administration did not come to Vienna with constructive proposals. The first 6 rounds of negotiations made progress, finding creative compromise solutions to many of the hardest issues that were difficult for all sides. Iran's approach this week was not, unfortunately, to try to resolve the remaining issues. And even more importantly, Iran started this new round of negotiations with a new round of nuclear provocations, as reported by the IAEA on Wednesday, and they have still failed to reach an understanding with the IAEA to restore the cooperation and transparency they have degraded in recent months. We know why we're here. The previous administrations decided to withdraw from the JCPOA. That's led to a dramatic and unprecedented expansion of Iran's nuclear program. This cannot continue, and the president continues to believe that there is a better alternative. He's committed to returning the United States to compliance with the JCPOA and staying in compliance so long as Iran does the same. He means it. If Iran is equally committed, a solution is at hand, but we did not see that from them this week. Go ahead.
Thanks, Jen. First, just clarifying what you said on Ukraine there. So it's fair to say that the White House is preparing for the possibility that Russia might invade.
Well, we can't predict from here what President Putin's calculus is or what the Russians' calculus is. We saw what they did in 2014. We've seen what they're doing on the border, and we're going to consult with our allies and partners and Congress here to be prepared for a range of options.
I want to switch gears totally to a statement from Senator Manchin last night. He voted he voted against a Republican amendment to zero out funding for the vaccine mandate, but then he put out a statement saying that he would actually support that idea in the coming weeks. What's your reaction to Manchin saying that he's against the president's mandate that much?
Well, one, it's vax or test, and obviously that is something we feel we have every authority to do based on a 50-year-old law that Congress put into place 50 years ago. We simply disagree. We disagree based on what we feel is a preponderance of evidence of the effectiveness of requirements, vaccinating or testing. You look at the private sector, there are a range of companies, airlines, hospital associations who have implemented these types of requirements effectively. We are the largest employer, the United States government, in this country. We have implemented requirements, and we have seen 96.5% compliance, something we're going to continue to build on. And these companies and the federal government are doing it for a range of reasons. It creates certainty, it allows people to feel safe in the workplace, and it's good for the economy. So we disagree on that front, and we're going to continue to press forward with these requirements.
But to that point, if the companies are doing them, I mean, that's Manchin's statement was that we should just continue to incentivize companies. Why, what are you going to do if he votes with Republicans and tries to really gut funding for these mandates?
I'm sure we'll be having discussions with him and anyone who is an opponent of these steps, but I don't have all the details of what this would actually propose. We're talking about implementing requirements through a 50-year-old law. It's obviously in the courts now. It is a good sign, no question, that companies are doing this in the private sector, but we still feel at this point in fighting the virus, it's important to move forward with these requirements. Go ahead.
Just a quick follow-up on Ukraine. Russia has been pretty clear for the past several months about what they're looking for out of the U.S., out of NATO, in terms of this crisis. They want firm, legally binding security guarantees. They don't want NATO in Ukraine. They don't want to see a military buildup on the other side. And they don't want to see Ukraine become a member of NATO. Where is the flexibility for the White House on this? Are you willing to budge on any of those issues?
Well, NATO member countries decide who is a member of NATO, not Russia. And that is how the process has always been and how it will proceed. I think it's important to remember where the provocative action is coming from at this point in time. It's not the United States. It's not Ukraine.
Okay, so let me ask you about abortion rights. You mentioned yesterday about the president's support for the Women's Health Protection Act, which was passed by the House and the Senate, and the House in September is awaiting action in the Senate. President Biden has talked a number of times about there being areas where he is open to reforming the filibuster. Preventing a default is one of those examples that he's given. Is passing this bill one of those things, and does he want to see quicker, faster, stronger action on that?
Well, again, we don't have a ruling from the Supreme Court. We don't expect that for several months. The president continues to believe that codifying Roe is something that should be done, and he supports this piece of legislation. But I think we're getting a few steps ahead in the process at this point.
But again, that bill was passed in September. Schumer said it will come up very soon in the Senate back in September. Where is that, and is the White House doing anything to push that along?
I would point you to Leader Schumer's office on any status of when that would come forward. Again, it's something the president strongly supports, and he is a strong advocate for codifying Roe. Go ahead.
In the president's remarks earlier today, when he was asked about his cold, he said that he is being tested daily for COVID-19. My understanding was that it was done with less frequency of that. I know Dr. O'Connor said that he was tested 3 times this week, but is there a change in protocol where he is going to be tested daily? And what kind of test is he getting, antigen or PCR test?
Yeah, I think we just put out some details from Dr. O'Connor that outlines how many times he's been tested, and I believe the kind of tests that he received. He received those tests because he had a cold, which would be considered a symptom, but it's not a change in protocol.
And so he is not going to be tested daily?
No.
And then yesterday, President Biden said that he spoke with Senators McConnell and Schumer on government funding. Has he spoken with Leader McConnell when it comes to the debt limit, and would the president be open to tying the debt limit to the NDAA?
I don't have any calls to read out for you, but we are encouraged by the conversations that are happening between Leader Schumer and Senator McConnell about how to address a range of issues that are in front of Congress, including the debt limit. And beyond that, we don't have any update from here. Good.
Thanks, Jen. Just to clarify, the president did say he was tested every day for COVID, so did he just misspeak there?
Well, I think, Weijia, I would point you to the transparent note we put out from the doctor to all of you that outlines how many times he was tested and exactly what he was tested for.
Okay, and then shifting to the new travel policy that goes into effect on Monday. The burden is on airline workers to verify test results to make sure they're negative. Is the administration doing anything to help train them so they know how to do that and so that they can spot fraudulent results, for example?
I would really point you to TSA, a division, of course, of the government. I'm sure that they are taking steps to make sure people are prepared to look for how to verify, but I would really point you to them for more details.
Okay, and the president just announced it yesterday. It goes into effect Monday. Can you share what you're doing to get the word out to international travelers, especially to Americans who might be coming home? Are airlines sending out the message to all those travelers?
This is not, I would just remind everyone that this is from 3 days to the day in advance. So it is a change in that regard. It is not an entirely new component. We have communicated that effectively. I think travelers have been able to abide by the 3-day requirement. We will communicate through a range of channels we've done in the past, but we don't expect there to be an issue.
And then just one more quick one. A lot of these at-home tests come with a stick. So your test result is the stick that either has 1 line or 2 lines on it. But the FAQ section says that you need, you will need to show a paper or digital copy of your test result. So is the stick the test result?
Again, Weijia, we've been implementing these requirements for the 3-day requirements since we returned to international travel effectively. I would point you to TSA and others for specifics, but this is not an area where we've had issue, and we don't anticipate them in advance of Monday. Go ahead.
Thanks, Jen. The Build Back Better plan's price tag is being described as incomprehensible by Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger, a Democrat. And Lindsey Graham says that he has heard from the CBO that they're going to do an alternative cost estimate and that it's going to cost more and add more to the debt. So is there any thought around here to maybe waiting for Build Back Better until a month that you don't have this big miss in the jobs report?
There's a lot of things gathered into that question, so let me do the best I can. Let me do the best I can for you here. In terms of the report of a new CBO, that is not exactly how it works. There has been, and let me just start with the irony here, that there's an irony that a number of Republicans who forced an unpopular tax giveaway to the rich that increased our debt by $2 trillion, and certainly didn't ask for a score for a continuation of that legislation that did add to the deficit, are now asking for a score, an additional score, post this bill being concluded for something that isn't even going to be law. They're asking about a potential continuation of these components of the package that, again, the president has said he would pay for. I can't get into the psyche of why. I would suggest that it might have something to do with their opposition to raising taxes on corporations. That seems to get under their skin a little bit. We disagree with them on that front. I would say the CBO has put out a score. A number of economists have put out scores. We have outlined in the past that CBO does not have a great deal of experience scoring components like the IRS tax savings. That's something that the former head of the CBO has also spoken to in the past, and that there are estimates about those cost savings that lead to not only our assessments of the cost and savings from the package, but the assessments by many economists.
Okay. On the pandemic, it's been more than 2 weeks since President Biden had a call with Xi. And on that call, we know he did not press him to help with the COVID origins investigation because you said that Xi just understands he's supposed to be transparent. So, in the 2+ weeks since, has he helped and been transparent yet?
I don't believe that's exactly what I said. I believe what I said is that we have pressed for this repeatedly. We will continue to, and we'll continue to do that at a range of levels. I don't, unfortunately, have any updates on the participation or willingness of the Chinese to add and provide additional data. Can I provide one other update to you, since you asked me about crime yesterday, and I have a little more information for you?
About crime? My question was about Xi
Well, you asked me a question about crime yesterday.
Okay.
So I was going to give you a little extra information. I followed up for you,
Great, thank
Peter. So I would note what should have added yesterday, but I learned afterwards, is that the Justice Department, the FBI, and the federal law enforcement have been in contact with jurisdictions where we have seen this high level of retail theft. So, for example, in Los Angeles, we've seen a rash of robberies. The FBI is providing assistance to a multi-jurisdictional task force led by the LA Police Department. I'd also note that on top of that, the Department of Justice announced last week that San Francisco, where a number of high-profile retail thefts have happened, will get money to hire 50 more police officers through the COPS program that the president has championed. That came as part of nearly $150 million in similar grants nationwide. So just a few updates for you.
Thank you for that. We will include that in our
I look
coverage.
forward to seeing it on Fox later today.
It's on Fox right now,
Okay,
I think.
I bet it is.
One more topic to follow up on some of the questions from earlier. The president was hoarse and coughing today. A lot of people in the workforce are encouraged not to go to work if they are exhibiting those symptoms, even if they are fully vaccinated. So are the rules different for the president?
The president, again, was tested, as we put out in a transparent piece of information from his doctor, where he received a response quickly from that test, enabling him to proceed. People also he had a cold, which is what you know from the information put out by the doctor.
But as you know from your own experience, it is possible to test negative several times before there's a positive test. So is there any concern about having him at work while he's got these symptoms, even if he is showing negative
I can
tests?
assure you that the president follows every protocol. He wants to keep everyone safe in the White House, and that's why obviously we consult with the doctor and we put out that information to make it available to all of you. Go ahead.
If I can ask you about the announcement the president made yesterday. Right now, some European countries are subsidizing the testing process overseas. The decision was announced here that the government would be having Americans submit to insurance for reimbursement. Why that decision and not follow what's been a successful path for a lot of European countries, which is the subsidizing of those tests?
Well, I would note first, Peter, that the announcement made yesterday builds on the steps we have taken to date, which includes ensuring there are 8 FDA-approved tests available out in the market, home tests. There were none available at the beginning. There were half that number available just a few months ago. We've also quadrupled the size of our testing program and capacity just since this summer. We've also invested billions of dollars here in the testing market. That market here includes reliable tests that meet the FDA's gold standard. Some of those tests might not meet that standard, and that's what we think the American people expect and deserve. We also want to ensure the testing market continues scaling up and remains competitive and innovative. We believe this will help drive down costs. So our view is we want to, and we share the objective with others, we want to make them more accessible. We want to lower the costs of tests. We also announced that we're going to be donating 50 million tests to rural and community health centers. That's what we're trying to achieve here, and we feel this builds on the steps we've already taken to date. But we have different tests, we have different market approaches here, and we're going to continue to build on what we're doing here in the United States.
The president, in his remarks earlier today, said talking about progress is not enough if Americans aren't seeing it, aren't effectively feeling it in their everyday lives. Why do you think that is, that Americans aren't feeling it yet? Is that a policy issue? Is it a messaging issue? What's the disconnect?
Well, I've answered versions of this questions before, but we feel here that COVID still has an overlaying impact on people and how they're seeing things day to day for good reason. People's lives don't look like they did a few years ago. You're worried about going to work. You're worried about your kids getting sick. You're worried about whether you're going to be safe in a restaurant or going to a concert. That impacts how people feel about how they're experiencing the economy. And there's no question, as much as we're seeing encouraging economic data, data doesn't move people. I can tell you that as a communicator. Their experiences in their daily lives move people. So he's going to be out there talking about how his plans will lower their costs, make their lives better, and hopefully that will give people a bridge to what he's trying to achieve here.
2 last little thoughts, just following up on the questions about his health. Obviously, like everybody else, we wish that he will get well soon. The question, though, is given the fact that he has a cold right now, are there any things that are being done differently? Have meetings been scaled back? Is he doing something separately, or is everything continue as planned given the test?
It's continuing as planned. He's taking some over-the-counter cold medication and probably some cough drops and some tea, but otherwise he's proceeding with his schedule.
And then just to finally to punctuate that very quickly, just for clarity, you said earlier that the reason he had these tests was because he was showing symptoms. So he gets tested though when he's not showing symptoms, correct?
Yes, on a regular basis, not as frequently, and even cold symptoms.
So 3 times this week was because he was showing symptoms. On
Correct.
other weeks, it would be less than the 3 times
Yes,
this
exactly,
week. Okay.
exactly. Thank you for the clarification. Go ahead.
Back on the new requirement for international travel
Yeah.
to the United States, what gives you confidence that it won't be an issue or a problem for travelers coming to the United States having to get a test one day before boarding their flights? Are you confident that there's going to be enough supply of accessibility for every traveler who wants to come here everywhere in the world?
Well, there have been some exemptions announced by the State Department where tests are not as readily available. So we look at all of the factors here, Steve, and we're not trying to make it more difficult for people to return home. We're trying to take every step to protect the American public. There have already been these requirements in place for 3 days. So yes, it is a difference, but people who have traveled have adjusted to that requirement, and this is just narrowing that requirement.
The requirement takes effect Monday. What is your advice right now to Americans who are watching or listening to this? They have only a few days left. What should they do?
Americans who are here or Americans who
are abroad and tuned into this briefing online?
Sure, no, I just wanted to make sure I understood.
Right.
A day in advance of their international flight, they should get a test, as opposed to 3 days in advance. That's the difference. Go ahead, Sabrina.
Thank you, Jen. A number of cities, including New York, LA, San Francisco, require proof of vaccination to access indoor dining, bars, and other non-essential businesses. Given the new variant, does the administration believe that more cities and localities should enact similar proof of vaccination requirements?
They may decide to do that. Our approach and our view has always been that's up to cities and localities. It is not, as you know, that CDC guidance has changed on this front. There's a lot we don't know about the variant. We're learning more every single day. But again, we continue to believe that's up to states and localities and what they need to do to protect people in their community.
And just similarly, with respect to cities and localities, there are a number of cities that still have not reinstated mask mandates. But they do fall within the substantial or high transmission category that the CDC has outlined for areas where there should be indoor mask mandates in place. So do you think cities like DC and New York, which are still in substantial or high transmission, should abide by the CDC guidelines?
Of course they should. Every city should. I would note, this wasn't exactly your question, but I felt this was an interesting piece of data as it relates to vaccination rates. Yesterday, 1 million people received booster shots, 2.2 million shots total. That's our highest day since May. So just to give you a sense of how people are consuming information, we obviously don't want that to be a response. Our objective is not for people to be scared. That is not what we're trying to do here. But certainly you're seeing that the impact of how this is being communicated about is being felt in communities. People are taking steps to protect themselves. Go ahead.
In the state dining room earlier, the president said he was putting together the most comprehensive and meaningful set of initiatives to make it very difficult for Mr. Putin to go ahead with actions towards Ukraine. Are any of those initiatives military in nature?
Well, I'm not going to outline them in more detail from here, but I would note that obviously economic sanctions in a range of formats, economic steps are always a part of the option. We have, of course, provided a range of security assistance to Ukraine in the past, and that's something that remains under consideration. But that's what I can preview at this point in time.
And just on the next tranche of Fed nominees, has President Biden finished the interviews for those 3 slots?
I don't have any update on the personnel process. You can all continue to plan for him to announce the additional nominees in short due time, but I don't have any update on the day.
Afghanistan, please.
Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Jen. Winter is very close, and Afghan people still in a bad situation, food crisis. Any plan of the United States for humanitarian assistance to Afghan people? And also, U.S. victim family 9/11, they expect to receive some money from the frozen money in Afghanistan. Do you have any comment about that? Although Afghan people lost so many people, like 165 people have been dead in Afghanistan. and Osama bin Laden was found in Pakistan, I think that 9/11 victim families expect this amount from Pakistani authority. And after
So I
people
would just
get-
note on the last question you asked, very important question, good question. It's under the Department of Justice is really the right entity to discuss that with. There's some discussion of litigation around that with some of the 9/11 families, so I would point you to them on that.